Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting will be conducted in person and as a courtesy via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Please note that while an option for remote attendance and or participation is being provided as a courtesy to the public and board members, the meeting hearing will not necessarily be terminated by technological problems interrupt the virtual broadcast unless required by law. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting do so using Zoom login information, or you can watch packtv.org/Duxbury for information about Duxbury program, including streaming and watching replays on Duxbury YouTube.
All right, open forum. Does any members have anything for open forum? Anyone?
Yes, in the course of our discussion last time about the MBTA Communities Act, I think there might have been some misapprehension of this as potentially reflected in Clipper as to my desire to comply with state law. I would in fact like to comply with state law. I would like us to, however, ask the state to defer so that we can have the town meeting in the ordinary course rather than special time. Just want to go on record.
Okay. Does anybody have any, they did add to that?
Well, I suppose I'll chime in as chair of the executive committees group, and I'll mention just that, just today reviewed the blue letter that came from the Attorney General directed for the town of Milton filing. I'm sure Wayne, you're aware of that. Chapter and verse, extensive case law supporting the state's authority to essentially dictate zoning. So I'm a lawyer, I defer to you guys that are in the business, but it does seem pretty strong, very convincing. And so, you know, it's worth, I think, just reiterating this, that it is the public interest that we're discussing. Despite the negativity generated by the strategy that the state's taken. It was pretty clearly laid out as, you know, an escalating series of steps of the state attempting to resolve this problem in the housing crisis. This is consistent with that long.
Has there been any information that either you have heard from the state that they might consider pushing back or allowing giving the towns a little bit more time?
I have information about that. They're trying to make it a pretty firm push.
At the end of the year?
Except they're not. I agree with that, but they haven't been very quick in terms of trying to get these things removed. And so the notion of not extending people who are actually working in good faith seems a little silly to me. You never know what the government entity is going to do.
Sure.
I think there's ample support for the ability of the state to govern zoning. I think the Attorney General might find less support for the ability to actually enforce that provision of state law.
Do you know?
Well, so I listened in on the MBTA zoning committee's meeting was at July 2nd. The only thing I take away from it, I know Stephen Gantz is very, I probably even by China. He's very convinced that the state's going to turn around this 90-day pre-approval. I'm not convinced that the state's going to have the resources or the ability to convince, get that pre-approval done in the 90 days when they get inundated with all sorts of applications or draft bylaws. And my other concern there, so I don't know, the question is it worth using resources to try and get that pre-approval if we don't, despite assurances from the state, I have my doubts that they'll get that 90-day done. And then secondly, if we go out to the town to start to in community engagement on the proposed bylaw, which is the plan, what if the state comes back and then has changes to our pre-approved draft? How does that look for the town in terms of engagement? Right, come out with a certain draft, and maybe the town has, the state comes back with changes, and now we've got to kind of re-massage our message to the town. So those are not concerns, but two things that I was wondering, the plan of attack on that. Other than that, I thought it was a productive meeting on the 2nd, and I think they I've identified a couple of good spots, and I thought it was a long meeting, but it was a productive meeting.
Thank you. If we can, is there a way, do we have a mechanism by which we can ask for an extension?
Ultimately, yeah, you write a letter to the state.
Could we do that?
Sure. I mean, the select board chooses to.
Is that something that we would want to think about doing?
But they have to, they must consider, but, right?
Considered asking for an extension.
Yeah.
That's likely.
I mean, it's pretty easy to, I think it's super easy to ask. And it just seems odd to me. I understand what the timeline drives, but if we're gonna have a town meeting in ordinary course in March. And they're not gonna get to it any. I think that they haven't gotten to a lot of them. Who cares? Like, I don't know. I don't know where an extension request would go, but I would certainly make the request if I were the select board, but,
The worst thing that can happen is they deny the request, right?
Right.
So
or they ignore
we've
it.
lost nothing.
So would it make sense to, would something maybe we'd want to consider would be like going forward with our working group, but also ask for an extension? Saying like, we've got this in place, we're concerned about timing, is this an additional expense to us, it's a lot more effort.
We're working in good faith.
We're working in good faith, we've already identified some areas.
Mhm.
Is that something, so if we wanted to do something like that, Paul, does that mean that, do we need to have, we're talking about this in open forum? So do we need to actually put that on a future agenda?
I think something like that does kind of rise to the level of an agenda. Which we can put on the agenda for the next meeting. Is that the joint meeting with the board of selectmen? So we had scheduled a joint meeting between the planning board and the select board for the next meeting. It will probably play out after the planning board meeting. We would go to their meeting. And the game plan was to have a discussion about the two locations that are being considered, that the working group narrowed it down to last week. And see if there's a consensus between the planning board, the working group, and the select board. And then just update the select board on what we've done and you know, the schedule going forward to have public outreach and education. So we could schedule that for the have that discussion on the 22nd, and make sure that was kind of included on the agenda, so that that specific agenda item would be clear to anyone interested. And in the meantime, between now and then, I can have a conversation with the town manager and see if that's something that he thinks his board would want to do or support or not, and see what, just get a sense from him about whether he thinks that's something that we should put on the agenda and talk about, or you know, whether it's not good.
Okay.
So that sound like a plan?
Paul, do you know if any other municipalities have actually submitted a formal request for extension yet?
I don't know, there's a lot of communities. What, I guess, the only thing I have for an update. The map that I provided to you probably a few weeks ago, hasn't really changed. As we know, most towns have their town meetings in the spring and now in the summer. But what I was told is that there are a few cities with city form of government, they can take up matters under a town council or city council. And can, you know, don't have to wait around for any of the town meeting. So I understood that there were a few cities that were scheduled to take some votes. And that there was one town meeting, and I think it was in Holbrook, where they, I think, voted to send it back to the planning board for further review and work. So no additional communities have approved it, no additional communities have said no, one back to the drawing board, and we're waiting to see what happens in some cities like Malden and Medford, you know, stuff like that.
So some things we can't have a vote, like that's sort of, do we have some consensus on that? Is that, do you feel comfortable with that?
Well, certainly, you know, since it's not on the agenda, we're not really engaging on it, but I can take the feedback. getting today to the next meeting, which is before that select board joint meeting. Bring it up in that form. And then the select board members, the rest of that. So,
So I think the idea is that I'm sensing that there is consensus around complying, we just want more time.
yeah, I wonder, and again, I'm
Yeah.
outside the lines, but I wonder if it is. Because a lot of it is dependent on the schedule, a special just for this. Don't do.
Right.
But if it push comes to shove and action is required, would it be sufficient for the town to approve the sites and instruct the select board, planning board to complete, compliant bylaws with it? Make sure that be a placeholder enough to prevent the action by the AG or something. So we'll come to the next
That's a good idea.
Welcome to join, open invitation, public meeting.
Yeah, let's do that.
That sounds good, thank you all. All right, administrative items, the following items can be moved as a single item, or we can move them individually. Does anybody care to make a motion either way? Or do you prefer, Wayne, as a member of the ZBA, is it helpful for you to have a little bit of feedback from the board, planning board?
It's always nice when the planning board weighs in. Paul has. Dr. Chris initially was providing the planning board memos to the zoning board on recommendations. That was always helpful, and I would hope be hopeful to continue to do that. But I can certainly take up the minutes. I'd like to move to have the June 24th, 2024 minutes approved as drafted.
Second. Any discussion? We're all here, so we can do a voice vote. All those in favor of approving minutes, yeah.
Aye.
Those opposed, abstained. Okay, great, thank you. Next up, CBA case 2024-08, 70 Smith Ave. Paul, would you like to just give a quick overview of your perspective on this, please?
Sure. So the applicants, even in Megan Delano, are proposing to raise an existing one-story home on Soul Ave and replace that with a three-story house that is bigger in volume. Doesn't really encroach too much further on the setbacks. You see, we're proposing to demolish an existing one-story single-family detached dwelling on a pre-existing non-conforming lot and construct a new three-story single-family dwelling. The lot is non-conforming in lot area and frontage. The existing lot is 6,534 square feet, residential compatibility district. And as you know, 40,000 square feet is the minimum lot size. So the property is got a pre-existing non-conforming lot and the structure that is pre-existing non-conforming, encroaching on the front setback and side setbacks. The existing house is 558 square feet. The proposed house is 3,454. The existing house is set back 11.4 feet from Soul Ave, and the front setback requirement is 25. That's one of the non-conforming features of the structure. The applicant is proposing to maintain the 13.5-foot setback encroachment for the front. The proposed house will comply with the 15-foot side setbacks and the 10-foot rear setback. The zoning bylaw, section 401.2.4 is the section that addresses expansion of a pre-existing non-conforming structure. And the bylaw has a series of considerations or findings to give guidance to the Board of Appeals when considering these types of cases. The majority of the increase of nonconformity is the volume of the house. Being a 500 square foot house and they're going to over a 3,000 square foot house. And that's from staying predominantly in the existing footprint and going up. The pictures that were provided by the applicant show a house that looks like it's hadn't been lived in for a while and produce a little, well, a fixer upper. The guidance that is in the bylaw, addresses things like, considerations about building height, building coverage, impervious coverage, width of the structure. In addition, the bylaw, so the Board of Appeals should, consider impacts, of views from the abutting properties, from public and private ways, should consider increased traffic, noise, and runoff. So this is, as a lot of the cases that come before the Board of Appeals, is a little bit of a, it's subjective. Since this property is already developed, it's already got a house and the driveway, and they're not really proposing to expand on the footprint of the building that much. To me, that means that there will not be a lot of new environmental impacts from clearing or grading, or producing more stormwater, because it's already got a building there. It's always good, even though the zoning bylaw doesn't talk about reinvestment or positive economic impacts to the community. That for me is always a consideration, and when there is an opportunity to take a house that looks like it has been vacant for a while, and have some folks willing to reinvest and to build a new home, add to the tax base, that would seem to be a productive thing for the town and for the applicants and for the neighborhood residents that have probably been looking at this home for a while, wondering what was ever going to happen to it. So I don't see that there are a lot of additional new impacts from the project, and it's certainly a judgment call, the Board of Appeals. But in ask the question about what I would do, I would vote to support the special permit application.
What's the,
Is it a special permit application or?
it's a special permit. What's the lot area coverage?
And so,
There you go. So it says existing is 8.5 and it's going to 21. How do you
someone representing the applicant? There, someone representing the applicant that could answer your questions.
Hi, this is Steve Delano, the owner. I missed the question, but if you could repeat, I could try to answer.
So there's a limit of building coverage of 15% for compliant lots. And at least as I read your plan, the existing coverage is 8.5%. And the proposed coverage is 21%, which exceeds the 15%. And at least as I read it, doesn't get the benefit of the 3% rule.
Yeah.
Maybe it does get the benefit of the 3% rule.
Even with the percent, it's still over 20%, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
it's 3% of the difference between the lot size and 20,000 square feet, which is a strange way to, so it might.
Yeah, we did factor in the 3% because with the lot size only being 6534, it's 20,000 minus that number times 3%.
Yeah, all right. So I see it. If you get the 3%, which is discretionary, you get to 1384 and you're proposing 1372. All right, I get it.
When that is on the application in the table, there's that was good, that does indicate 6% existing, 6% proposed, and 3%.
It's just. That's just another discretionary decision. All right, as far as I'm concerned, this is come up in front of the zoning board enough that would, that, but this board can do whatever they want.
Any more questions of the applicant? 2024. Have a motion to,
I just want to, as a new planning board member, I'm trying not to rock the boat, but I have a question for you, Paul, and it relates to the material as provided, because I only read the application. Not that familiar with the 3% rule, so I appreciate your clarifying that, Wayne. And it speaks to the concern that I had, which was that when I read the cover sheet and the statements at the top, that, minimize the increase in the nonconformity, which is the guide rule for nonconforming is not increase the degree of nonconformity or minimize the increases. It stated, seemed to state that it was not increasing the nonconformity. And when I read through all the details and looked at the actual numbers and the percentages, they're quite high. So it seems as if the application itself has some internal inconsistencies. And that makes me question the whole thing. So I wanted to ask you, Paul, technically, what is the standard of review for these in terms of that type of consistency check?
So the applicant, could certainly design a 558 square foot building and replace the one that's there without increasing the volume. However, from the existing conditions are a pre-existing non-conforming lot from the area, non-conforming structure with respect to a front and a side setback. So those non-conformities are already there. So the biggest increase in non-conformities, if they kept the exact footprint, is the volume, the second and the third floor. Nowadays, there aren't too many 500 square foot homes being built. And so, this is to meet, the owner's needs and, current modern housing trends is.
Oh, sure, no, and I want to make it clear that I'm
It
not.
is that they could comply and not increase the volume at all. And just stick with that footprint, and, they probably wouldn't need to take it to the Board of Appeals, if everything just kind of stayed the status quo.
Sure, no, I understand that, and fine, application, it was really more in terms of the, like I said, the lack, there's a certain inconsistency. Every data and how it's presented, the text and the numbers don't line. So,
So you're saying there's an inconsistency between what's on the plan and what they put in their application?
well, just the assertions, that's what that,
Okay.
in terms of the degree of nonconformity. So,
So I was about to weigh out here, but I won't weigh in again. So I had a conversation with one of the select board members, not about this application at all, but about the topic more generally. And I expressed to this select board member that the zoning board has really limited capacity to deal with volume issues. And we've had this problem, quite frankly, since Paul was on the board. And I'd sit next to Paul and he'd talk to me about volume. And my sense of this was, it's not the bylaw, and it's hard to regulate for something that's not specifically reflected in the bylaw. And the select board's, the select person's view on this was, well, this is the kind of thing that they would like to see the planning board come. That these volume increases are a planning issue, if not a zoning issue. And I took that particular piece of advice to heart, because I think it's actually certainly well-meaning. I think it actually is quite perceptive. We do not regulate volume. We don't. But I don't mean to signal this one out, and we're going to deal with this specifically at the zoning board level. But you're going from a single story, by all accounts, is a pretty modest building to 3 floors. And if the zoning board can't look at it, the select board's, the select person's view is the planning board ought to.
So, let me ask this, when you say we don't regulate volume, who is we?
The town through its zoning bylaw.
Right, so how is the planning board gonna do a better job of regulating volume if the zoning board and the town do not regulate volume?
I don't think they can regulate volume. I think what they can do is comment. And the planning board ultimately has the ability to regulate volume. They have to propose a bylaw. And
Right.
that's what I mean, if I'm gonna have any role on this board at all, I can tell you, the thing that I want to do the most is a substantive amendment of the zoning bylaw to deal with some of the modern realities of what we are addressing in town, including the fact that some of the properties are on tiny lots compared to 40,000 square feet. And I would like to try to have this board conquer more than sort of this,
6:27 p.m.
more than this general code reorganization of, the reorganization issue, but really get to the substance of some of this thing. So how do we regulate volume? We gotta start talking about that.
Start talking about changes to the bylaw.
Yeah.
Paul, where are we with our bylaw change work group? Are they just focusing on the application?
So we've had one meeting, general code has taken the feedback, the answers to their list of questions that they posed to us. And they are in the process of turning the code into an electronic e-code. They said that they would have that done by the end of July. And once that's done, we'll schedule another meeting of the recodification group. From what I understood from the one meeting that we had, was that they first wanted to get it, get a revised version with those changes in an electronic format. And then they would focus on the more substantive items that need to be changed. And from what people have told me, there's been an ongoing discussion and review by a previous working group or committee and the previous two planning directors, where there were notes from, detailed notes from the previous planning directors about things that should be changed. So it sounds like there's a lot of work to do ahead, and it's been going on for a long time, and I think it's because it's such a big task, and the turnover in staff has contributed to why it hasn't been done. I don't know to what extent general code does zoning consulting. There are other firms that do, that focus on this stuff, and I don't know whether it makes more sense to bring on a consulting company that would just work to get it all done. I haven't seen the reviews from the previous planners. I've started to look at different sections of the bylaw and agreed that, yeah, there's room for some improvement. So that's where we are right now. We can anticipate an E-code revised version coming in early August. And then I think this group is gonna start working on the next step of the process, is to start at the beginning and go through it. Based on how the first meeting went, it's gonna take a long time if the future meetings kind of get into the weeds like that.
Just the reshuffling.
Just the discussion of the questions from general code generated hours worth of discussion. So it's there.
And can you remind us how long you're with us?
The way it's looking now under the state retirement laws, I will time out at some point in August, probably mid to third week, maybe. Like that.
Wayne, I hear what you're saying, and I agree. I think there's huge appetite, and the planning board's been working on some semblance of this and moving this forward for a while, and they, it's been so great. It's always great to have a planning director when we're here to talk about that. I wonder if there's anything, does it make sense to wait till that's all finished before we have conversations? Like if it's for the working group or the board to start talking about maybe priorities of working on the bylaw?
I think it would probably make sense to schedule an agenda item with the working group and have the planning board have a conversation and find out, what exactly what they're planning and so forth.
We do that maybe early August.
Yep, the chairman is the representative of the planning board to that group right now, and he can, hopefully fill in the blanks on some of this, but, there's a lot of work to do.
You mentioned something, are you aware of any grants that we can apply for, whether it's NBC or with somebody else that where we might be able to enlist some help with this in the fall?
Over the last half a dozen years, there's been some new kinds of planning programs that support planning, and so I think that there probably are community compact. There's a couple of different grant programs that that this kind of work would be eligible to fund, and I think that we're working on administering some grants from the same kind of programs right now. Some of the things that we're working on, like the House Corner Master Plan, is the type of grant funding that I think could be used to help support a rewrite or an update.
Right, that's good. Anybody have any other questions for this topic? Okay. Great, thank you. All right, next up is the A and R.
We need to.
Oh, yes, sorry, we can. Sorry.
So, Madam Chairman, when I wrote the memo reviewing the Board of Appeals case on Solar, we don't know each other well enough for me to start to, speak on behalf of the board. I don't think that's appropriate at all. So my intent here was to just kind of lay out the facts, review the plan, the application, and lay it out for the board so you can understand it. And as I said, I feel that the things in the zoning bylaw that the Board of Appeals is supposed to look at are subjective things. I don't think that the things that have measurable impacts, like additional stormwater, additional traffic, those are things that the impact from this project will be very minimal. And so some people, think small is beautiful, and other people don't have a problem looking at a bigger home, and that to me is a kind of judgment that I leave to the planning board and the zoning board. If the board wants me to write memos on your behalf or something, I can do that, just tell me, but I didn't feel it was appropriate for me to speak on anyone's behalf in these circumstances.
This is what the report you provided is very helpful. And break it all down and provide some context.
That's what I was trying to do, is boil it all down for the board.
I don't think anybody's asking for more than that, Paul.
Yeah.
That was.
That's exactly what we're.
Well, I'll just comment. I think that just look at the law, looking at its current use in state the last few decades. It does seem that there will certainly be stormwater runoff impact because you're increasing the 560 square foot structure with the much larger structure on the front of the lot, and then it looks like in the plans that the rear of the lot is going to be a septic system, and the whole rear of the lot now is vegetated, so that's absorbing all the rainwater that falls on the lot. Once you have a septic system in the roof, it's probably so there could be a concern there.
Any other comments? All right, do we have a motion to move forward to motion of any sort?
I'll make a motion to defer the approval of ZBA case 2024-08 at 70 Soul Ave and reference the planning director's report. Awesome.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, so for roll call vote, all those in favor of this motion, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? That's a thank you, everyone. All right, now next up, A and R 2024-31 to 33 and 47 Hardin Hill Road.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Or Tim. For the record, I'm Paul Duxbury, and I'm working for the Pino family, the owners of the two properties at 3133 on one lot and 47 on the other. You have before you a plan for an approval not required plan to rearrange and improve the that has been between these two lots for many, many years. Donna Pino is the what we have for the two lots on Haddon Hill Road. We indicated that with the verbal approval of a few waivers from the planning board 2 months ago, that we were going to submit two plans, an approval not required plan, which you have in front of you this evening, and a second plan that's on the agenda 2 weeks from tonight on July 22nd for the two lot subdivision. So step one is to carve out the new lot line between the two lots. We basically have 3.4 acres of land from the west to the east. The Pinos themselves live on the water side of this land at the at 67 Haddon Hill Road, last house on the right. And across the street is St. Margaret's Convent and the facilities for the sisters. The current lot line is this line here in the middle. What we're proposing to do is to create a more functional use of the two lots by creating 3 lots total. And the A&R lot itself is the westerlymost portion of the land, which comprises basically 31 and 33 Haddon Hill right now. And just in summary, the A&R plan will create the new lot, which has more than 40,000 square feet of contiguous upland, 43,459. It has about 1,149 plus or minus square feet of wetland down at the southern end, going out towards Eagle's Nest. And basically, this is the beginning of what we need to rearrange the land and ultimately construct 3 new homes on the 3 lots. So the A&R lot here is step one. This will house one of the 3 lots in the future. And then 2 weeks from tonight, you'll see the plan, which has already been filed with Mr. Halkiotis, to create the 2 lot subdivision for the 2 other lots at 40, basically at 47 Haddon Hill. And just, when you go through the items required for, for the A&R plan, all the details from the checklist and everything else, again, the 40,000 square feet of contiguous upland. The wetland line is shown here. We have the 2 facilities with the septic system and the infrastructure with the driveway itself. But basically, again, this will be the A&R lot that would be created. And I did meet with Emily and Paul about a month or so ago. Paul had a couple excellent suggestions. So we rearranged his lot line a small amount in here to accommodate everything both for today and for tomorrow, but basically still give us the land for the future 2 lot subdivision that you'll see in 2 weeks from tonight. But again, the A&R lot is for the one to the western side of the property.
Well, does it make sense to just deal with this together? Because do you still want the A&R if the subdivision doesn't get approved?
Well, in a way, that's a valid statement, Mr. Dennison, but when we talked to Paul about it a couple of times, step 1, step 2, step 3, chicken or the egg here, we have to create at least the lot line for the potential subdivision. When we came before the board 2 months ago, looking at the requested waivers, the compliance that we felt we were close to complying with 2 months ago, with or without the waivers, and now with the verbal guidance, if you will, from the planning board, it made sense for us to come in first with the A&R plan, and then basically step 2, come back for the 2 lot subdivision. In a way, yes, it could be done all in one meeting, but if something didn't happen if a question came up that night that questioned the A&R plan, then that would just defer any further decision on the 2 lot subdivision. in the minds of some of us, we felt it's reasonable risk, if you will, to follow this process here. And the times I've sat with Paul and Emily, you know, what you'll see before you in 2 weeks, you already have the copy of the plans on file from the last few weeks. It's a simple creating of the, you know, 2-lot subdivision with, you know, 2 new lots with 200 feet of frontage for each. And basically, again, they meet all the zoning requirements, the 40,000 square feet of contiguous upland and 200 feet of frontage for each.
A question about 31 and 33. Is that a pre-existing non-conforming situation where there's 2 dwellings on one lot?
Those lots have been there for a while. It's one of those options that, you know, from a legal guidance, we could have condominiumized 31 and 33, kept 2 structures on one lot, if you will, into the future. But you're restricted on size of everything and obviously a better use of the 3.4 acres that are there now. And, again, it was an option, but, you know, council said the easier option or the more practicable option is the 2-lot subdivision plus the A&R lot. So you'll see 3 homes more spread out. More than likely, they'll be larger in size. This is quite big itself, even though it's spread out, but obviously you'll see 3, you know, modern structures on the 3 lots.
But what is the intent on the parcel A and parcel B, these smaller lots that are noted?
Okay, parcel A is part of 47. Oh, I'm sorry, parcel A, as you can see here, is to be combined with lot 1 to create the new lot 1. Okay, so parcel A is a little bit of land from 47 going over to 31, 33. And the opposite effect for parcel B, that's part of 31, 33 today, and that's gonna be transferred over in the future, 2 weeks from now, hopefully, to the other 2 lots. Go for the subdivision plan.
Parcel B is part of 47 now, right?
No. Parcel B is the lot, the common lot line, Ms. Turcott is right in here. So parcel B is part of 31, 33.
In the future.
They'll go to 47.
Well,
I'm
It's
confused.
gotta become part of 47.
It becomes part of 47. It's 31, 33 today.
Okay, so gotcha, I'm with you, I'm just misunderstanding the lot lines. This is
The lot lines are
existing
dashed.
and
This
this
is the
is proposed.
existing gym.
Gotcha, okay, I'm good.
This goes to the right. This little sliver of rectangle goes to the left. Any other questions?
So at least as I understand the A&R law, you don't even need us to declare these lots. You need it, if you want to record it, you need it if you want to sell it, but you don't need it.
But technically or legally, it has to be approved as not requiring approval.
No, it doesn't.
Well, other plans we've done,
Oh, I know
they're
why you
endorsed.
want it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But there is actually case law on this. So I don't have any issue with this A&R plan. But I, as a general matter, would love to see in the future, these all submitted together in a comprehensive plan that isn't piecemeal. But I don't have any problem with this one.
Fortunately or unfortunately, if that question or direction had come up on May 6th when we were here, then we may have taken a different course of action, but at this point, in good faith, we followed the direction and
Not criticizing
taken
you at
step
all.
by step here.
We almost encourage people to do it this way, by the way it's set up.
I don't, this, I mean, obviously this is comprehensive.
Yeah, it would make more sense if you have to looking at 3 lots
Yeah.
together. 1 plus 2, but this is right.
But I don't have any questions on this plan. Paul, does everything checks, right?
Yes, I reviewed the plan, the plan complies with the regulations, each lot has the requisite amount of frontage in the area. Wait, was this a recent case?
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
I want to read it. You can just let me know what it is. I'm curious to see.
I'll send it to you because Mark Casey sends it around every single time he comes in here for an A&R. And he's right.
Got any more questions for the applicant? Yes.
I think it's more for Paul, the Scenic Road Act. Can you explain that a little bit as a new member and why it's not checked off on the list?
So the Scenic Road Act requires that the planning board hold a public hearing. If somebody is proposing to cut down a public shade tree within the right of way. Or alter an existing stone wall. And the town of Duxbury has designated all the roads in town as scenic roads. From, I guess, I did not ask this question. I know that they're proposing to request, they're requesting that the planning board waive the construction requirements for the bubble cul-de-sac that you'll see in the subdivision plan. So they probably aren't gonna need to cut any public shade trees. They could relocate a driveway around a tree, I suppose. I haven't looked at the street to see where the driveways might interact, but there's certainly a way around that where they would not need to cut any public shade trees if they use existing driveways or site their driveways in a location that won't affect the shade trees that are on the road right now.
How do we guarantee that?
Well, they will have to come back, if they choose to site a driveway in the path of an existing shade tree, they will trigger the Scenic Roads Act. The planning board will need all the public hearing and conjunction with the tree warden and decide whether or not to authorize them to cut that tree or possibly convince them to move the driveway away from the tree.
Thank you.
Just 1/3 I can tell you all about.
Yeah, I remember.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question about, we're discussing A&R just 31 and 33. It's top. And so when all is said and done, all the work is complete, will there still be 2 structures on this lot with 2 driveways? So that,
There'll be 3 structures total on 3 separate lots. 1 lot, 2nd lot, and a 3rd lot. So I think the conceptual plan we gave you 2 months ago is pretty much the same with a few little minor tweaks here and there with 1 lot line change we had to make in here. But significant changes, no.
Any other questions? Good motion.
Move to endorse the A&R plan for 3133 and 47 Hardin Hill Road dated June 12th, 2024.
We have a second. Any discussion? All right, we'll call for roll call votes on the approving an A&R. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The abstentions?
1 exception.
1 abstention. Thank you. Motion passes. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Have a great night.
All right, next up, 333.
See you in a couple of weeks.
That's right, thank you. Much for the second. 333 Franklin Street subdivision, we've got water line and drainage easement discussion, lot release for request lot B.
Yes. So we brought up the water line and drainage last hearing and town council. We can add on to this, but I think town council was wondering whether we need this or not. I have drafted it, I presented the draft, and it was a question whether or not the board wanted to require it or not. So
So my recollection of this is that we didn't have enough people that formally vote on this, but the town council. Have suggested that we, because the town, this is not gonna be a public roadway, the town doesn't really have any interest in. And therefore does not need the easement, because of the bond. I think we discussed that. About Paul, did you get that right?
Yes.
Is there any discussion now?
That was perfectly willing to accept the town council's recommendation the last time.
Is that for both of them, or are these two?
Then, no, this is a water line. and
Water
drainage.
line and drainage easements. Any questions from the board?
I concur, I was here with Gwen, yeah, we just didn't have enough numbers to put on it, rest.
So we're gonna have to, the motion is we're gonna have to amend provision of the of your authorization to delete that part.
Recall that was-
I can provide a little bit of clarification. The planning board's decision on the subdivision is dated March 29th, 2024, and condition 2A, small Roman numeral 4, is a condition of approval that says approved easements for town of Duxbury access to public drainage and water supply structures if any. So I'd recommend that the board take a vote to waive or rescind or nullify that particular condition so that he actually complied with the condition. Lawyers wrote the easement documents and he submitted them. But upon further review by council and discussion amongst the board and in the office, we don't think anyone needs to do that. So I'd recommend that the board vote to waive that particular condition of approval of the March 20 certificate of action.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Question.
Jude?
We've heard from legal counsel. Has DPW or water department been made aware of this and they haven't been?
We haven't talked to the water department. We did talk to Pat Brennan, the board's consulting engineer, and he also said, you know, they're gonna have individual water lines servicing each home. No need, there's no plan to put a water main down the new road, and so it made sense. With respect to drainage, the town really should avoid being drawn into having to enter private property to maintain drainage system that's supposed to hopefully be maintained by a homeowner association. So I don't think we need either one.
Any other questions or discussion? We'll have a roll call vote to vote on whether to release, nullify the water line and drainage easement discussion for 333 Franklin Street. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Thank you. All right, next up is the lot release request, the lot fee.
Sure. Great. So, so the 3 lots have been recorded at the registry of deeds in the county. Paul and Pat Brennan and I had a meeting on last Tuesday, July 2nd, to inspect the road. Road's complete. Pat Brennan issued a list of items that are substantially complete. There's certain items that are not complete. The final paving in the road is typically left off to when all the homes are constructed, so you don't damage the road. So there's that. There's a few other items. So at this point, I'm requesting the release of lot B, which is the lot that has the existing home on it. The home's been renovated. Trying to put it on the market, and I will either finish the work or request or put a bond in place for the remaining work prior to requesting a release for an additional lot. So I'm here tonight just to request the release of one lot, lot B.
Thank you. Any questions of the board?
So what would we do? Just condition the release on what?
I'm sorry.
If we, what would be the conditions of the release?
Usually the board votes to set a performance bond, and the applicant, the owner, would provide the bond to the board before the lot release is officially signed. In the past, we've worked with applicants, and the board has taken a vote to set the bond amount based on the recommendation of the consulting engineer, which the board does have a copy of. from Patrick Brennan, recommending, his estimated cost of void is 23,400. And so in the past, if the way to try to, work with an applicant to move it forward, would be for the board to vote to, set the bond amount. And this estimate includes a 20% for contingencies. And then, in other times I've worked for, the board has signed the lot release form. And then, when the applicant comes in with the bond, the lot release form is handed off and they can return that. Another approach, would be for the board to, in good faith, just, vote to set the bond amount. Ask Paul to, provide that bond and come back at the next meeting with that bond. But sign the lot release now and he can move forward with the sale of the property. So there's kind of three different versions of that. One is set the bond amount, and then Paul comes back with a bond that's acceptable to the board. Depending on the type of bond, if it's a tripartite agreement, we would send that to town council to review it. But if it's a passbook account at a bank, that's cash, that's good. So that's one way to do it. The other is for you to sign the lot release form, vote to set the bond amount, and then when he comes in with a bond, if it's something straightforward, it doesn't need town council's review, we can hand off the form and he can record it.
Have you figured out what type of a bond you're going to post?
I have not. My intention coming in here tonight was to request the release of lot B without working on the bond items right now. I just thought I will come back for the release of the other two lots with all the bond stuff in place. I'm just trying to kind of get this on the market and there's a lot of finances out on the table on the acquisition and the cost of the road. I had a problem with my mortgage company, which I think we talked about here, and so I had to pay off the mortgage prior to selling the home that I'm trying to list on for sale right now. So there's a lot out there on the line. So I'm requesting the release of this one lot. I will either finish the work or come back with all the bond paperwork before I request the release of any of the other two lots. And I think I've been working in good faith with the board and the town. Scenic, working with I gotta still work with the tree warden, work with our neighbors, and so that's the request at this time. I'm not going anywhere, and just be thankful if I could try to sell that one house.
So. Let's deal with this as a notion in my mind. It's like, I have very little doubt that we're gonna. that Paul's gonna want to sell those other two lots. Right? And we'll have an opportunity to insist on a lien, or frankly, we'll have an opportunity to determine no lien is appropriate. This is a fully built house.
Right, I mean, it's not, I mean, guess it's part of subdivision, but, so if the house is there, it always has been, so.
This
Yeah.
seems to me like kind of thing that I'd just be fine with. The only question is, well, what if he flipped it? Okay, if he flips it, the other person would still have to.
Yeah, the bond transfer.
Right, yeah, so the other person would have to do it. So I'm personally in favor of this request, irrespective of there's no bother.
Does it make sense to agree to set the bond amount? That way, at least you know what you're working with when the time comes.
And that's fine. I know there's a mechanism for reducing the bond if some of the work
Yep.
on that list is there.
Right.
Which I might do. I might put in the
Yep.
meets and bounds of the property before now, just so everyone knows where everything is. But I haven't made that decision yet, but if you want to set the bound tonight, that's fine. And if I do that work, we can come back and readjust the bond before I actually put it in place. But It's fine with me, really.
Jim, and then the board should be reassured that there are those two other lots that are
Right.
not supposed to be sold, until the board votes to release them.
Well, they actually can't
They can't.
be sold.
Yeah.
Until either the work is done or the bond is posted, so I don't see any risk in releasing lot B.
I'm not worried either, but I've seen these things, sell,
Never know what
lots
tomorrow
sell,
brings.
things like that without having the lots released. And,
Yeah.
But I'm not worried about that in this scenario.
Any other discussion?
I'm in favor too. I mean, we hold the leverage with the weekend lots.
I make a motion to approve the lot release request for lot B and to post the bond. Not condition to, but I don't know if this is the right motion, but to agree that the bond amount consistent with Pat Bennett report, 23,400.
We have a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Roll call votes. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, any abstentions? All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I do have one question on the process. So there's a form that needs to be signed by the board that I believe Paul needs to get recorded at the registry of deeds, correct? Yep. So is that form,
They're gonna sign it tonight and then we're gonna get it notarized, so it'll probably be ready for you to pick up tomorrow. Then record.
that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Really appreciate all your time.
Thank you.
Anyone want to talk volume at some point? Let's
Yeah.
have a beer.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I may have had that discussion already.
No, actually, yeah, that discussion, you've been here, kind of talked to me about that, hear that perspective. Okay,
Well, Paul's an architect. It's, you want this, it's always important.
absolutely. Okay, it is 7:03. Our timing worked out just about right. To open up our joint meeting with the, do we remind me, do you have to vote to open this meeting?
It's not a public hearing.
Okay, thank you. I'm just making this, all right. We welcome the Duxbury Affordable Housing Trust and LDS Consulting to meet with us tonight. Thank you for joining us. Oh, Emily, are you able to take them off? Can they take themselves off mute? Actually.
Good evening.
Hi, Emily, are we all set to, for the trust to join?
We're all set.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to let us have a shared meeting tonight to discuss the update on the housing production plan. I think you're all familiar with the production plan. It has to be updated every 5 years, and the trust has undertaken to retain Lynn Sweet and LES Consulting to update the plan. They did it the last time back in 2019. And so this is an update on work they've previously done. They've got a lot of experience in doing this. And so Lynn has prepared a presentation tonight, and I forwarded the presentation and also the preliminary report, which he's already provided to us. The trust has been through the report at least once. We've had one meeting with Lynn, and we've provided our feedback to her at that point. So tonight we were hoping to present the plan to you. I have Lynn present the plan to you. Field any questions you have so that any modifications might be made as needed. And then ultimately this plan would be presented to the Board of Selectmen before hopefully being approved and then sent along to EOHLC for their certification and then used for the 40B program. So I don't know if there are any preliminary questions before we get started, or if we can just turn it over to Lynn and ask her to take us through the presentation. All right.
Thank you.
All right, Lynn, the floor is yours.
Great. Good evening. It's wonderful to be working in Duxbury again. It's really, and I apologize, I don't know why my cat is jumping up. This is Zoya. It was really wonderful for me to learn all of the work that the Affordable Housing Trust has been doing over the past 5 years. Just from a procedural perspective, the trust does need a vote by both the planning board and the Board of Selectmen to approve the plan. So you can make a decision at the end of the meeting if the planning board wants to approve the plan with any, agreed upon changes, or you can do a joint meeting with Board of Selectmen. Ultimately, the town manager does submit it and does need to, note those votes. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. I just put together some, kind of highlights, and it's, a pretty dense document. For those that are new to the housing production plan process, the first part of it is the housing needs assessment to try and understand what the need and demand is for various types of housing and different populations in Duxbury. And then the second part of the plan is the actual plan part, which is to try and give objectives and goals and strategies for the next 5 years. The wonderful thing about the housing production plan is I know it's hard to produce housing in Duxbury. You have infrastructure constraints. You're a built out community. But you do get brownie points from the state when it comes to applying for funding, or if somebody comes with a 40B, if you have an affordable housing plan in place. They really appreciate, the state does appreciate that. In fact, I just withdrew an application in another community because that particular community had passed their MBTA Communities Act. And they basically said, they've got a housing production plan, they passed MBTA communities, we're not going to grant you your 40B sort of thing. So I just want you to think that besides it's just being a plan on paper, it actually has real meaning to the community. It also could allow the community potentially, if there is some production, to even get funding and become a housing choice community. So the goal is to provide information to the town to follow with regard to funding resources, provide the trust the ability to review proposals that might be coming in town, and to be proactive in affordable housing. So if there are no questions, I'm going to kind of run through the elements of the housing production plan. This is somewhat of our table of contents. And so we have the executive summary, which kind of takes all of our research, rolls it up into a few pages, as well as what the action steps are. So if you only want to read the first 10 pages, you'll get the bulk of the plan. We look at a lot of demographics and housing characteristics. We look at your existing housing inventory and analyze that. And we look to see what different income levels there are in the community, and if there's housing to match those income levels. We look at the town's zoning bylaw to see if it is friendly towards creating housing. And we look at constraints. As I mentioned, we know infrastructure is a very big one in Duxbury, and Duxbury is not alone in that. I don't want you to think that it's a judgment. It's absolutely not. And then we provided goals and strategies. Goals is what do you want to do? Strategies is how do you get there? And so like we've done in the past, we reviewed the old plan. We reviewed any plans the town has worked on since our last plan. We had a lot of phone calls with different town staff. We thank them. We thank the trust. We talked to the interim planner. We spoke with the DPW and the tax assessor just to make sure we were gathering all of our facts correctly. We use a lot of online sources for demographic information in addition to the census. And we looked at the zoning bylaw and any recent changes that you've made that impact housing production. And we looked at the gap, and the affordability gap is what's the difference between an affordable rental unit and a market rate unit? What's the difference between a market rate home, single family home, and an affordable home? We also provided some different types of funding that the town could use with either for their own parcels that they're looking to develop or to provide to developers. And we got an update on how much funds the Housing Trust Fund has, whether or not that's earmarked or allocated towards anything. And we looked at demand and provided recommendations. We did get feedback on our recommendations from the Housing Trust members.
Lynn,
As
can I
well.
ask a couple of questions?
Sure.
First of all, who maintains the SHI index in town?
Sure. So basically, this, I don't know who asked the question, but thank you. The subsidized housing inventory is actually maintained by the state. It used to be called DHCD. Just a year ago, they changed the name to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. It's a mouthful, EOHLC. So every year or two, I believe every 2 years, the state sends out a document to the town and says, you know, here's what we have, has anything been added? Has anything come off?
Right. So the question I ask you is, who in town is responsible for reporting this to the state?
Sure. So basically the Housing Trust has actually been working with an outside consulting firm to get units added on to the inventory. So that the sort of the second half of what I was going to say was that you don't have to wait until the state asks every 2 years. You can send paperwork when any new units are created. So the Housing Trust has been paying very close attention to what's on the SHI. We identified some units that weren't on it in our last plan, and the trust worked with consultants to get a lot of those on. So it's my understanding that the trust is out front on this, but Dan, if I'm incorrect, let me know.
No, I think for the moment, you're absolutely spot on. Earlier in the year, when it became apparent that the SHI for the town wasn't necessarily up to date, we talked to Rene about this, and he asked if we would take the lead in getting this updated. So we hired Metro West Collaborative to update this, and they're in the process of finalizing that. Their data is included here in Lynn's report. At the same time,
That's exactly why I asked the question, because my perception was that earlier this year, we had an SHI that was not up to date, did not reflect the appropriate numbers, but I think what you've just said to me is that the Housing Trust is aware of this, they've taken care of it, they've hired a consultant, and they're moving in the appropriate direction on that. I thank you for that answer.
Yeah.
The broader question that I have is that I'm looking at a proposed production goals model that projects production of housing over the next 5 years. And irrespective of the fact that we're looking at a 5-year window, we're still not getting to 10%, which would take us out of the 40B realm.
right.
Why aren't we having a production plan that gets us to 10%?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would really like you to allow me to finish going through my presentation so everybody else gets kind of caught up to where you are on that. But the short answer is when we did.
Quite frankly, I'm sure people allow you to do whatever you'd like to do.
Yeah.
But this is a public hearing and the board is permitted to ask questions. And the principal question that I have, right, is how do we, and by the
Okay,
I'm
so
looking, and it only goes to 9.12% in 2020 as a plan.
okay, so when, again, I don't know if you were around when we did this 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I put in a goal of getting you to 10%. The trust and the planning board in the town at that point felt that it was very unrealistic, given the infrastructure constraints and how much the town can produce in any given year. I can't just wave a magic wand and say, this is how you're going to get to 10%. there are constraints in Duxbury and you've been inching up towards 10%. But unless a very large parcel becomes available that doesn't, that can support a septic treatment plant, which is, I think is very highly unlikely, then it's going to be highly unlikely that the town is going to get to 10%. So you don't lose points by not getting to 10% in 5 years. This is a realistic look. And, from my perspective, and again, given that the town is just starting to peel back the layers of MBTA communities in 3A, the best opportunity is a larger development at Beacon Properties as to whether or not they have, extra land there that and extra capacity in their sewer treatment plant. But right now, we don't have any of that information. So I was very conservative in my goals. And if it is the will of the trust and the planning board and the select board to adjust those goals, since this is a draft, I would be happy to do that. So I'm going to go back to my presentation and then circle back just again, because I want everyone to understand. I want to get to that chart for people to understand why you're asking that question, if that's okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Okay, so since, I think.
Excuse me, Lynn, hold
Yeah.
on just a moment, please. Yes.
And to kind of elaborate on that response, there are gonna be some opportunities for the townspeople to try to address the affordable housing issue within the next year. The bottom line is affordable housing needs to get built. That's how you get there. Right? The analysis that Lynn's done in the plan production plan has shown that with the current inclusionary zoning bylaw that's been in place for like 20 years, produce 1 unit. Right. So we are currently have consultants engaged to work with the town to update, to come up with a master plan for Hall's Corner that includes some multifamily housing. There's a plan underway to update the inclusionary zoning bylaw and the residential cluster bylaw. And there is plans to work with the consultants on the MBTA zoning. Whether the MBTA zoning comes up in November or next March, that's an opportunity for the townspeople to take a positive, productive step forward to create more affordable housing by addressing some of the problems with the inclusionary zoning bylaw. Hopefully that will become a more attractive option for developers to take, as opposed to the option that they've unfortunately been taking over the last few years, which has been a 40B over and over again. So that's how we meet the affordable housing goals in the plan is we need to adjust our zoning. And there's gonna be 3 different bylaw amendments within, the next year that are opportunities for that. And then there's 40Bs, and that has been the method that the developers have chosen and the towns work with them, but that's currently clearly the trend. And so we need to address the zoning, modernize inclusionary zoning. Townspeople need to take a serious look at what they want to do with the MBTA zoning. And those are opportunities for them to work to implement the recommendations of the.
Yeah.
Could the last 2 speakers identify themselves? Because we can't tell from afar who's
Sorry,
speaking.
Dan, this is Paul Helpiotis.
Thank you.
This is Dan Coughlin. Just in a further response to that, and I couldn't agree with that statement more, that it's just as Lynn had said, we have constraints. We have physical constraints, we have legal constraints in town. And those need to be addressed. Some of the physical constraints obviously cannot be addressed without a zoning change. And therefore, that's something that we have as one of our objectives is to work with the zoning board and others in town to make those changes so that we do have the opportunity to do these kind of things and to expand the SHI. The further point is as I said earlier, we took the burden on of trying to update the SHI. I think that it was Renee's contemplation that ultimately the responsibility for the SHI might fall with the planning director. But we've been giving Paul the information as well to make sure that he's in the loop. So irregardless of where it ends up, we want to be sure that we have maintained, a current level of information here. So I think with that, if Lynn can help us understand again some of the goals that we have here and the opportunities we have, perhaps from a zoning perspective, to make some changes here as well to increase the opportunities that we have. Steve Marshall, did you have something to add?
Yes, I do have a question. It's for Lynn on this particular slide. Item number 2 here, Feinberg Bog Road. 3 affordable homes by Habitat, no SHI eligible homes by Habitat, no SHI eligible. Lynn, are you saying that Feinberg Bog is not eligible to put on the SHI?
Sorry.
Thought that got resolved.
Yeah, I'm sorry that this seems to be out of date. I believe that 3 of the homes are eligible that were, if I'm remembering this correctly, 3 of the homes are at 80% of AMI, and I think there are other homes that are 120% of AMI. And I apologize. I believe the 80% homes, I believe, are eligible. It looks like Martha's raising her hand.
They are on the SHI. They are the
Yeah.
ones listed as 0 Temple Street.
Yeah. Sorry about that. That's
Okay.
my mistake. So just to kind of jump back in, there has been a lot of progress made since 2018. The Franklin Street home was sold. Feinberg Bog was built out by Habitat. Some of those homes ended up on the SHI. The town has also purchased 7761 Temple Street and is looking at that for senior housing. And there is an RFP out for 0 East Street right now to do rental units. Champion Builders finished Chuckleberry Hill. That added both low income and middle income units to the SHI. And there is another property that is in litigation on Kingston Way that is the result of a property that has a 61 either A or B tax status that allows the town to have a right of first refusal. So it's possible, if the town is able to exercise its right of first refusal and settle that litigation, that may open up opportunities for more development. As mentioned earlier, the town is working with the consultant to amend the inclusionary zoning bylaw. And also, as mentioned, the trust is working with the town on the House Corner rezoning, and the town also completed its master plan. These are just, again, what the trust has been working on since 2018. This is, I'm going to go over a couple demographics. This isn't going to come as a surprise to you. The bottom line is that residents in the town are getting older. They're not having as many children. It's harder for people with children to afford to live in town. So you'll see that the over 55 population is the one that is continuing to grow, and that the younger populations are not. And I just threw in this gap analysis so that you would understand. Again, this is the average existing, single family home. You've got homes that were built in 1900. You've got ones that might be built more recently. So if an average single family home of all the homes that were sold in the last 12 years is 889,000, the ability to purchase an affordable home at 80% of AMI, I believe we did this for a 3-bedroom home, would be priced out at 342. So it's over, again, I don't think this is going to shock anybody, but there's over $500,000 gap for a single family home, a 3-bedroom. And then we did the same analysis for a 2-bedroom condo. And again, you're close to 300,000. So that is why it is hard for lower income households to come into the community. For, first time home buyers to come into Duxbury. It's definitely a second time home buyer house after you've owned a house and gotten some equity in. And then we just looked quickly also at what the rental gap would be. And that is, basically, we looked at the pricing at the newest, market rate property, the, Elm that got added, I think 2 or 3 years ago. Their average rent is about $3,585. I believe we did it for a 2-bedroom unit. And so there's a difference of, for an 80% unit, $654 a month. And if you go down to the 50% level, $1,749. And I kind of just took this a little bit farther to say, listen, if you want to live in a rental unit and pay a third of your income towards your rental costs at Elms, you need to make $142,000 a year. Even because Duxbury is in the Boston primary market area, even 80% rents are not that affordable anymore. You need to have 117,000. And then for the 60, 88, and 73. So it's very tough to be a renter in today's market. As I said, even with affordable units, because Duxbury is in the Boston primary market area, it's the Boston, Quincy, Cambridge. So it goes even as far as Gloucester and New Hampshire, and every town is different, but they're all lumped together because that's what the government says you can charge. And then we basically tried to look at the SHI with what's on it today and separate it out into rental units and into ownership units. And we basically came to the conclusion that all of the rental units that have been built in Duxbury, to the best of our knowledge, are currently on the SHI, and that's 401 units. We are concerned about Island Creek Village West, and I think that's something we should continue to have the conversation on. There are 48 units there where their affordability restriction expires this year, and the contacts that we had previously in Beacon are no longer there. So we really want to, I'm hoping over the next month to find a new contact for the town to find out what Beacon is doing with those affordable units so that they will remain affordable. So that's kind of a question mark. And then we also did the same analysis on the home ownership units. And we, listed in the first column all of the units that are on the SHI. We listed some units that are built but not on the SHI. One of them is just not SHI eligible. And a couple of them, the paperwork has already been sent in. There is a project, I believe, Webster Point Village, that's still in litigation. So we put that under proposed. And then we have Parkside subdivision that has been permitted but not built yet. And then there are a few down here again that has the paperwork has been filed. So there are more units that should be on the SHI shortly. It's not a heavy lift to file the paperwork. You usually just have to include the affordability restriction or the certificate of occupancy. So I don't have a lot more slides here. We did look at age and income for family housing, 2 to 4 person households by income level. And so 80 to 110%, 110% or over are considered middle income. And then 0 to 30% is more where people that are looking for public or subsidized housing, they would fall. And then tax credit deals would be the 30 to 60%. So there is definitely households in town. This probably just means that they're paying more than a third of their income towards their rental costs. And then we looked also at demand for over 62 housing, and you can see that the numbers are way higher. And that's just because so much of the population today is over age 62. And so this is the chart that the gentleman was referring to earlier, which is the housing production goals. And so when you look at this chart, you have to understand that every unit built gets added in. So you're constantly chasing that 10%. So you want to make sure that any new project that's built has at least 10% affordable units. And when it comes to inclusionary zoning, you probably want to be closer to 15% so that you get ahead of that 10% goal. So basically, that is what we tried to do, with this chart, which was to continue to add units onto it. And yes, we only got to 9.12% over 5 years, because we're really adding what we know is in the pipeline from 24 to 25. And then we took a conservative goal of 20 units per year after that.
Lynn, if I could make this is Dan Coughlin again. Just a comment here again, as you pointed out, the 464 for 2025. If you went back to the earlier slides and you added up the rentals and the home ownership, we're at about 467 with the proposed developments, and that doesn't include the East Street development. East Street is worth talking about for a moment, because we originally were talking about East Street as being the potential for condominium development with 8 units, 2 of which would be affordable. We went back and changed the scope and suggested that it should be a rental property, because if it's a rental property, all 8 units, even if only 2 of them were affordable, all 8 would count against this SHI. So one of the things that's important to consider here is the fact that most of the additions to the SHI, of late, have been from ownership units. If we have an opportunity to do more in the way of rental units, which I think is a crying need in the town as well, that would accelerate the ability to achieve this, the goal of 10%. However, having said all of that, 10% is a moving target. We're in 2029, we'd be at 9.12%, but in 2030, we're going to have a new census, and there'll be a new denominator to that equation based on the amount of new development in the town. So we are chasing a moving target, but we think we've got some ideas on how to get there, and include some of the zoning opportunity, as well as trying to put more of an emphasis on rental units.
Yeah, and what Dan is saying is true. So the state, because it's so hard to do rental housing when it comes to housing production, if either 20% of your units are at 50% of AMI, or 25% of your units are at 80% of AMI, and it's a rental project, the state allows you to count 100% of your units on the SHI, even though only a small portion is affordable, because they believe that the bigger need in the state is rental housing. And everything Dan has said is 100% correct. One of the things that is included in this, that wasn't included in the last plan, is that the 2020 census numbers came out. And so that base housing count here was much higher than it was when we did our housing production plan. So every time somebody builds a single family home and adds a unit somewhere, there's not an affordable home to offset that. And again, it is a moving target, because we don't know what's going to happen, with that project, the 48 units at Island Creek. So we do the best we can to estimate it, and we believe that all of the units that are in the pipeline are going to go on. And we can certainly adjust, Dan, if you want me to change this to add, the rental units, we can work on that offline too. So the last couple of slides are really the broad brush goals. The first goal is to preserve and expand the supply of affordable housing, focusing on rental units at the 30% to 80% of AMI, focusing on home ownership units that are both low income and middle income, focusing on special needs populations, such as survivors of domestic violence, traumatic brain injury, veterans, and persons that are on the verge of homelessness. And also looking at trying to provide housing that would attract younger residents, as well as the growing elderly population. Really, there's a need for any kind of housing, in Duxbury today. Basically the idea of not building McMansions, but providing smaller, smaller homes that are more like, cottage style. And that's because it's less costly to build and it's also less costly to maintain. And so the next set of goals is to amend the trust documents to allow them some more flexibility in the great work that they're doing for the community, to potentially get some administrative support so Dan can go back to his day job. And to get some funding through community preservation funds to help with that administrative support, as well as to continue to provide subsidies in the way of financial support with local developers who want to build affordable housing. So if you're RFPing those 8 units, if the town puts in a match, $100,000, that could basically leverage $1 million with the state. So it's always important to have a local investment to kind of lead the way when you're doing a project, to work with leveraging state and other funds. And then I guess it sounds like there's a question about the ability for the trust to dispose of property, whether or not it needs to go to town meeting and then, go to the trust. So I think that, as trusts grow and evolve, it's always good to look at your bylaws. And then the same thing to gain a better understanding of, what's the trust roles, what's the select board role. So that's more of an administrative function. And as we've discussed already, and we heard from Paul and we heard from Dan, supporting other efforts that are going on in the town that would therefore support the creation of affordable housing. And we've listed a few of those. The accessory dwelling unit zoning bylaw is probably going to end up mute because it's in the state spawn bill, and both the state, the Senate and the House have a mandate to allow accessory dwelling units in single family home districts. So it's probably worth waiting because it has to be reconciled by the end of July. It may not be a local choice anymore. And then we talked about the fact that the town is looking at locations for the MBTA community zoning as well. And then that looks like that's a mistake. Explore the hiring administrator to facilitate the attainment of the objectives. So I guess it's just it's adding on to what the administrator's role would be. And looking at sources of funding, creating a developer financing toolkit. We've done that for some municipalities so that small local developers might know where to apply for funding. And then continuing to work with local developers on developing projects, to continue to look at sites in town that are underutilized. And again, I think that there could be some opportunity over at Beacon Communities, and also just continuing to educate the public as a whole about what the goals of the plan are. You never know when you're driving by an old building and that could be your next development opportunity. And that's it. I tried to keep it short because you've been through it before. I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you have.
I just have one comment, if I may, Mr. Chair. The 48 units at Island Creek West that
Yeah.
expire, their affordability criteria expires at the end of the year.
Yeah.
I think it should be a higher priority than simply finding someone to talk to at Beacon. It needs to be resolved because that's going to be a major setback if we lose those.
Agreed, but we need to. I've got friends there. We need to open the door and get the discussions going. But yes, 100% agreed that should be a very large priority. It's not necessarily going to fall off that day, and it's possible that they're already working on financing and have a plan in place. We just need to get to the right person.
Steve Dubuque, did you have a comment? You're on mute. Steve, you're on mute.
Unmute. I'm unmuted. The only comment I had was that the selectmen have a right in a case where the town hasn't achieved its 10% to basically require that the units previously covered under a 40B have to remain affordable beyond that 2024 date. I think that's worth exploring. It really is, gives the town a little more space to basically say, we want that housing to continue to be affordable.
Are you talking about the town having a right of first refusal on it?
No. I'm talking about the town basically making the statement that the town hasn't achieved its 10%, but it requires these units to remain online. And so it expresses its view in that fashion, the selectmen do. And in the past, that's actually held up, meaning that those expiring use units remain online. Now, I don't know how long they continue to be online.
Yeah, there has to be a plan. You can't just remove units. There is a process that Beacon would have to go through the state with filings to have the expiring use unit come out from affordability. And if they so I don't know, I can't remember what the statute is, but yes, that's why I was saying that it's not going to happen tomorrow, but we need to find out what their plan is. And there is a list of Beacon is sophisticated enough that they will have some sort of a plan in place.
Right. I'm sorry that Diane Bartlett isn't with us tonight. Diane has had conversations with Beacon going back several months, so she could update us on some of that. But
I thought when I spoke with Diane, that she had not been able to get the person we both worked with last time 5 years ago, when there was yet another project that was coming up, has left the company. So I just need to find 5 minutes to call one of the principals and find out who's in charge of this property.
Is Keith property still involved in the ownership and decision making here? Beacon was contracted by Keith Properties to manage the property. Is the primary owner still Keith Properties?
Keith usually is the builder of the projects, and sometimes they do the management, but I think that these are Beacon managed now.
Excuse me, Lynn?
Yeah.
Would it be all right if the committee took your committee questions offline? We have some questions for you here.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there Bree, you had your hand up. Is there something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to ask if the 52 units in Duxbury Village were also counted in the SHI.
Is Duxbury? Let me just.
Village is subsidized housing.
Yeah, let me just pull up the SHI right now. I don't want to answer something.
It's on Chestnut Street.
Yeah, the Chestnut Street, or basically any of. So our subsidized housings are counted in the SHI, of course, right? Counted towards the 10%.
I'm sorry, what was the address?
It's on Chestnut Street.
Yeah, 59 Chestnut, all 52 units are all 52 units are on the SHI, Bree.
Okay. Good.
It's the first entry on the SHI.
All right, thank you.
All right.
I'm sorry, Dan, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if we could go back to the planning board's questions, that'd be great.
Yes. So if we want to thank you very much. Lynn, you're right. The document that you sent was very dense. So we appreciate the fact that you made it provided this presentation, which was a little bit more abbreviated for us. I have a couple questions about the chart, the first one that Wayne was referencing. And that is the actual, what chart was that? It was the percentages and the plan going forward. The proposed production goals.
Yeah,
Would you mind bringing that back up, please?
Yeah.
Yes, that's my first thing. All right, so the first thing I have a question about was in column 2024, we have say production of 1, but I don't see that production of 1 added to into the column of the 2025 housing units.
yeah, I'm looking at this right now. Let me go back and look at my math on this.
I think what it's saying. And Lynn, I think I can answer your question. So
I'm just gonna go quickly to my Excel on this and I just want to go look at the formula on it. I just want to I just want to look at the actual cells if you don't mind.
If I may, the issue with the chart is that the total number of houses across the second row does not go up.
Yeah, that is actually,
Well, we add housing every year. That's the total
yeah,
number.
it needs to. I'm sorry, I need to fix the chart. I was looking at the same thing, that the housing units is actually not going up, so I should be. Hang on one second.
Well, I understand also the basis of the problem, which is the fact that that number, the 10% is the census figure. So it is pinned at whatever it was.
every 10 years.
Yeah, but 10%.
And it's gonna jump up.
Right,
some-
that's pinned, but the 10% number. Oh, yeah, no, so it's the bottom, let me just see. Okay, so I'm just gonna bring this up. So basically what's happening is that in this column is where the 18 units gets added. So these units are added here. And so it's this number that's going up every year to get you to the 544 based on the base number.
I would argue that we could do a good job, rather than seeing a giant jump in 2030.
Yeah.
From 5967 to whatever it might be, you could probably project the increases in housing units in row 7 there, rather than having it remain static every year because you're basing it off of 2020 census data.
Oh.
You're gonna end up at the same point. Right? So basically if I add all of these units together here, right? And I add them to here. Right? That's the new number. And then I'm going to divide this number by this. Oh, I feel like I just did it the wrong way.
By 5967.
So you're gonna end up at the same place, basically, right?
Through the chair, I have a question. What do we need to do tonight relative to this proposal as a board? Are we just here to talk about it, or is there some vote required?
Yes.
There is definitely a vote required. There needs to be a vote in favor of the housing production plan, along with any, changes from both the planning board and the board of selectmen, the select board.
Having said that, if there are substantive issues that you need us to address, we can always defer the vote and do it at another point in time. If there are, on the other hand, comments that we want to incorporate here and you feel comfortable approving it, subject to the inclusion of those, that would be fine as well. So it's the board's pleasure.
I may have to make a disclosure. Lynn, maybe you aren't the same person, but did you used to work for Brown Rudnick Consulting?
A very long time ago. My company is 25 years old. Who is this?
It's Wayne Dennison.
Okay.
Brown Rudnick is my law firm. I actually would have been a participant at BRFG Consulting, irrespective of the fact that Lynn apparently previously worked for my firm. I don't feel as if I am in all compromised, and I do feel I can participate.
Same thing, that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dan, I think we have some questions about the proposed production goals, because it seems like that's one of, that's a big piece of the plan going forward, right? Like, what are our goals? Where do we want to be? What are the number of units? And so I think, it's what I'm kind of hearing is that we'd like to see, the housing units plus the production units each year, because the 597 number is the census number, correct?
The 597 is the 10% of the 2020 census. That's right.
Yeah,
Right, and so
that's an
we'd like
easy
to,
thing to do.
and so if we're looking at, this chart goes to 2029.
Yep.
Right.
So what we'd like to do is make sure we're not surprised in 2020, 2030 or 2031, I guess, when the numbers come out.
Right.
And so would it be possible to extend the chart out so that we can be able to plan for that? So we'd be looking at having a running number of total units, if it were. And then also one thing that I was going, pardon?
Let me just see, the issue with that is we have no control over things that happen as of right. So if somebody is building single family homes as of right, or they're converting a one family into a two family,
Sure.
those we don't have any information on. We did get some building permit numbers, I believe, from the building inspector. But that's what makes it really hard. The only thing that I'm able to identify is what's in front of the planning board or the ZBA today. So, like I said, the only thing that I can do is add in the things that we know about.
Well, I'm gonna make a comment, again, Wayne Dennison, in my capacity as a planning board member. And quite frankly, given my knowledge of the issues that the zoning board faces. The degree to which this town does not want us to regulate zoning through 40B is enormous. Every 40B proposal garners significant pushback. And the notion that we have a production goals, proposed production goals that don't get us out of 40B is inconsistent with my view of where we should be heading as a town. And that's just my 2 cents. And if we can't get to this because there is some institutional or legal impediment, or then we got to talk about how do we overcome that impediment. But quite frankly, a proposal that goes 5 years into the future with a goal that doesn't get us out of 40B, I will not personally support.
Great.
So the issue here is that if you go to page 37 of the plan, I'm just gonna, bring that up right now. 37 has sort of what your building permits have been over time. So I just want to bring that up right now. Hang on a second. I'm not trying to be, argumentative with you. So let's just bring that up, because maybe we're looking at, at the wrong thing. So this is the information that we got. We got demolition and single family home permits and additions. The issue is if you demolish 29 and you build 20. So this is the problem, is that you're just replacing homes with homes, if you will. So you're not building, in most instances, more than 20 units a year. And that's sort of where we got, our number from, was that we averaged this. I'm happy to raise the number. If it is the will of the planning board, you know, and the trust.
If you could go back, Lynn, to, with that data in mind, if you could go back to that original chart that we were just looking at that shows
Can you hold there for one quick sec? On table 27.
Yeah.
Right, 2020 is an outlier, right? 17 units, we were in the middle of COVID and everything. was
COVID,
shut
yeah, 2020 and 2021 are 100%, you know, outliers. I agree with you. You know, but there
pretty
is,
conservative in the 20 ads, and I think we can get to 10%. We need to set that as a target if that's the goal. I mean,
if
we
that's
have
what
to
you
have-
want me to do, I can absolutely increase the numbers. I'm again, I work for you, and I gave you a starting point. Let me just go back. Dan, you asked me to bring the chart up again.
Yeah,
All right, so,
We have, excuse me, Dan, we have another question from the board. Go ahead.
yes, please.
yeah, it's Tag Carpenter. I mean, I wanted to make sure I took a moment to thank you, Dan, for getting this together. I think that, it's clear in all of the planning that the town's been doing for the last 5 years minimum that there's a demand for housing that's not met. And we've been all at loggerheads as to how to do anything about it, and having this in hand now, a plan that we can actually attempt to execute on, is a fantastic step, and I really appreciate you bringing it forward. And so my real comment, and it's for the planning board as well, is that the key takeaway I get from all of this, is that it's a complicated problem. We're finally addressing it. But fundamentally, it's that we have now a plan. And the first step, as we know from our comprehensive master plan, is forming an implementation committee. Because a plan without implementation is just a wish.
Isn't that what the trust does?
Well,
That
No.
is one of our recommendations, is forming an implementation committee.
yeah, so I'd like to suggest that the planning board make a strong statement to the select board that we feel they should make it an urgent priority to put an implementation committee around the housing production plan. And I want to reinforce that point with the MBTA communities, which is also housing. So this work is going to be very intensive for several years. And the Affordable Housing Trust has its business of managing an investment pool to try and produce housing. And because we don't have staff support for housing production in the planning department, all of the work falls on them. That's how this is getting done. We certainly have seen some of the other boards.
So
Yeah, so this is, if you go deeper into the plan, that is the first thing, create a housing production plan implementation committee.
Then they can take the bull by the horns and run with it and do all the legwork that the Affordable Housing Trust.
But to do that, it needs, an implementation committee is not the Affordable Housing Trust. It's somebody from the trust, it's somebody from the planning board, it's the town planner, it's the, building inspector, it's concerned citizens, it's, it's a lot. If you're gonna put it all in the trust, then they're gonna need, sort of that administrative support, and they might need outside, consultants. But we've, other communities who've worked in, like, Lynn, they have a implementation committee that literally meets every month, and it might even be like local real estate brokers. It's like, it's a broader group.
I think that to try and put a fine point on exactly that, one of the things that we said to Lynn after our first review as a trust was, this is a plan that has to be owned by the town. It's not just the Affordable Housing Trust plan to implement, but it's a town-wide initiative because it needs the support of the planning board, the zoning board, the board of the select board, et cetera, in order to be able to implement this. And if we were to go back to that slide and increase those housing production goals so that we achieve the 10% level at the end of the decade, I would feel it important to have a comment somewhere that indicates that's an aggressive goal that's going to require substantive change in our zoning bylaws in order to be able to implement and achieve those objectives. And even in that section that Lynn had just talked about before, where we identified the need for a an implementation committee. Again, kind of a bold statement there that, these are steps that need to be taken if we have any expectation of achieving the kind of goals that we've set out for ourselves in the production plan. And I think that's again consistent with what I'm hearing from the planning board, that we need to set aggressive goals, but we need to recognize the difficulty it is to achieve those goals, so that we then work cooperatively to make the necessary changes in the zoning and other implementation plans in order to be able to get there.
Dan, the good news is that we've actually, one of the goals of the planning board is to work on the zoning bylaw, and we're actually working, as Paul mentioned, we're already got some working groups working on the inclusionary bylaw and the cluster bylaws. So there is movement afoot, and there is support for this. But I think one of the things that we would ask of you is if you could go back and revise that plan, knowing that yes, it is an aggressive ask, but that's something that I think that we all appreciate seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like I said, we're, just so I have no problem with what you're asking. I think it's great. We're here to, get the feedback today. You're not asking something that I'm objecting to in any way. But I do want to let you know that the town is going to give you a lot of brownie points for having a master plan, a housing production plan, for taking actions to amend your inclusionary zoning bylaw, create the cluster bylaw, create the overlay. And if you're 15 or 20 units off your SHI, they may very well deny a 40B because you are working towards production. So I'll get it to 10%, but don't feel like, even if you don't get there over the next 5 years, that you have to give in to a 40B sort of thing. And I feel bad saying that because our office does a lot of 40Bs, but the state wants to reward communities that are taking things, being in control of their own destiny. And Duxbury is 100% doing that by the projects that they've supported over the years.
Can I ask a question?
Good, Mike?
Yeah, can you characterize for us what I don't like the word committee because there's 1,000 of them and everything. But if it's a task force that's really going to go after and get this thing done, or a working group or something that looks like it's really going to get something done, could you characterize the type of roles and experience and talent that you need in a group like this in a town like ours, so that the select board and a new planning director coming in and other people that are working on this thing in the town can say, these are the kinds of people that we need to put on this kind of task if we really are serious about it?
Well, is that something I can answer?
Did I?
From what I understand, I read that there was a recommendation to create an implementation group, and so I think that there are various options on how to do that, whether the trust itself could appoint a subcommittee, or whether the select board could create a broader group with representations from other organizations in the community and citizens at large. But I agree with what Tag said, that if you want to try to make something happen, you really need to have a separate dedicated group of individuals that have staff helping them to implement the recommendations in the plan.
Well,
One of the things that we, hang on one second, Mike, one of the things
my
that
request is of Lynn, whether she could
right. So I'm trying to answer.
architect that group for us.
Well, that's an implementation. It's not under my current scope, but what I would like to suggest is that I have put a whole bunch of avenues in the production plan for planning grants that weren't in the prior plan. Mass Housing has a planning for production program, and the town may be able to actually apply to Mass Housing to get a planning grant to help the town form an implementation committee. So that you don't have to pay for it out of your own funds. But I will put a couple of examples in that recommendation of potential committee members. And I'll just sort of say off the top of my head, it's going to be the movers and the shakers that have the political influence to get to yes. Get to yes on the zoning proposals that you're working on, get to yes on the MBTA community locations. And I'm not saying that to be glib or anything like that, but it's the people that are going to have the ear to the ground and the constituencies to kind of bring people in to get the support that you need, that are going to have like skin in the game. I don't know if that makes any sense. So I'm happy to add that in.
Okay, I think it'd be important, again, with recognizing that we're going to have to bring this before the select board for their approval, that we, I don't want to say challenge them, but we put it before them that we need to have this implementation group, task force committee, whatever we might call it, constituted of the following kinds of people, and perhaps apply for a mass housing planning grant in order to fund that. But that we have to have the select board's approval, and buy-in on this concept if we're going to be able to move this plan forward in an aggressive manner and achieve the kind of goals that we're setting out. So it strikes me, unless others feel differently, that we're perhaps at a point where we've given Lynn a lot of thoughts and feedback and modification of the plan as we've outlined it so far. And it's perhaps best if she has an opportunity to go back and integrate that thinking and then send us another report that we can then, hopefully have a briefer meeting and one in which we might approve this plan. Does that make sense?
I think that sounds like a great plan. Thank you, Dan.
So but did anyone else have questions too before we?
Any other questions?
I just wanted to mention that I'm almost done reviewing it. I do have some comments, some of my markups, suggested changes, and I'll have that done within the next day or so. I can send those to Lynn and copy Dan so that he can see what I'm commenting on, and she could incorporate some of my comments into the final revision if she sees fit.
Right. Thank you, Paul.
Also, Paul, I just want to make sure, are you looking at the June 27th markup?
Right. That's the one I sent to the planning board.
Okay, that's all. I just want to make sure that.
Yeah, they didn't get fixed, right? Yeah. Bree, did you have a question?
I do. When I'm just wondering, and the planning board, I heard that you were still discussing the clustering bylaws. Is there more discussion about multifamily zoning bylaws? Because when you build 5 units and only one is, affordable housing, that doesn't get us anywhere. But if you take one house and split it into 2 and make it both affordable housing, that gets us somewhere.
The MBTA Communities Act is directed specifically at the multifamily housing issue and the ability to make that multifamily housing as of right, subject to site.
And as a town, are we?
Yeah, we're complying.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of addressing the question, Bree, I think you're asking where that stands. The community, MBTA Communities Working Group has met twice. The last meeting, we discussed the affordable housing mandate that would come along with the MBTA community zoning, and a figure of 10% affordable was discussed.
Oh, so basically are you going to ask for an increase? So I think what makes it difficult for MBTA communities is that your inclusionary zoning isn't functional today. Is it going to be fixed before you apply for MBTA communities? Because you could apply for up to what you have in your inclusionary zoning bylaw with a fiscal impact study, basically. If you wanted more than 10%.
Do you mind if we shut that conversation for our next meeting?
Yep.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Paul will communicate with Lynn, and we look forward to seeing you again another time.
All right, thank you again for.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.
All right,
Thanks so much for your time and your efforts. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
thank you.
Good night.
Did I move to adjourn? Do we got anything else going?
Our agenda.
I'd like to move to adjourn.
Okay.
We are
All those in favor? Aye.